October 15th, 1988, Madison Square Garden. The most famous arena in the world was buzzing with an energy that even veteran New Yorkers had rarely experienced. Tonight wasn't just another concert, it was Voices United, a one-night-only charity benefit featuring some of the biggest names in music history. But nobody in that packed arena of 20,000 people could have predicted what was about to happen when two of the greatest voices ever recorded took the stage together. Whitney Houston was at the absolute peak of her powers in 1988. Her second album had just dominated the charts, and her voice was being hailed as one of the finest instruments in popular music. Meanwhile, Michael Jackson was riding the unprecedented success of his Bad album, having already proven himself as the undisputed king of pop. When the organizers announced that these two superstars would perform together for the first time ever, tickets sold out in less than 4 minutes. If this incredible story of musical magic moves you, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments who you think has the most powerful voice in music history. Now let's dive into this unforgettable night that left everyone speechless. The backstage area at Madison Square Garden that evening was electric with nervous energy. Whitney had been warming up her voice for over an hour, running through scales that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Her vocal coach, Gary Katona, stood nearby with a mixture of pride and amazement on his face as Whitney effortlessly hit notes that most singers could only dream of reaching. What many people didn't know was that Whitney had been preparing for this specific performance for months, not just the logistics of the duet, but pushing her vocal capabilities to new limits. She had been working with renowned vocal technician Seth Riggs, the same coach who had helped Michael develop his falsetto techniques. Seth had been exploring the upper limits of Whitney's range, discovering that her voice possessed capabilities that even she hadn't fully realized. "Whitney, your vocal cords are like a perfectly tuned Stradivarius," Seth had told her during their sessions. "Most singers have to strain to reach notes in the sixth octave. You're accessing the seventh octave like it's your natural speaking voice. I've worked with thousands of singers in my career, and I've never encountered an instrument quite like yours." The technical aspects of what Whitney was planning for that night were staggering. The note she intended to hit was a C8, a frequency of 4,186 hertz that exists at the very edge of human vocal capability. To put this in perspective, most trained sopranos consider a high C, C6, to be the pinnacle of their range. Whitney was planning to go 2 full octaves higher. "Whitney, save some magic for the show," Gary had joked, but even he was stunned by what he was hearing. Whitney's voice that night seemed to have an otherworldly quality to it, as if every star in the universe had aligned to create the perfect vocal instrument. The preparation for this moment had been more intense than most people realize. Whitney had been following a strict regimen for weeks: no dairy products to prevent mucus buildup, hours of breathing exercises to expand her lung capacity, and meditation sessions to maintain the mental focus required for such an extreme vocal feat. She had even consulted with opera singers from the Metropolitan Opera to understand the physiological demands of accessing her highest register safely. Dr. Steven Zeitels, a renowned laryngologist who worked with many professional singers, had examined Whitney's vocal cords just days before the performance. "What I'm seeing here is exceptional," he had told her. "Your vocal fold structure is remarkably flexible, and your breathing technique is allowing you to support notes that would damage most singers' voices. But you must be incredibly careful. What you're attempting is at the absolute limit of what the human voice can produce." 3 dressing rooms down, Michael Jackson was going through his own pre-show ritual. Known for his meticulous preparation and perfectionist nature, Michael had been rehearsing the choreography for their duet for weeks. He had specifically requested that their performance be of "Greatest Love of All," Whitney's signature song, because he wanted to showcase her incredible vocal abilities rather than compete with them. Michael's approach to this collaboration revealed something profound about his character as an artist. While many performers might have felt threatened by sharing a stage with someone of Whitney's vocal caliber, Michael saw it as an opportunity to be part of something greater than himself. His personal diary from that period, which would later be published, contained entries that showed his deep respect for Whitney's talent. "Tonight I share the stage with an angel," he had written the night before the performance. "Whitney's voice is a gift from God, and I feel honored to be part of whatever magic she creates. My job isn't to compete with perfection, it's to provide the perfect setting for it to shine. Michael had been studying Whitney's vocal techniques with the same intensity he brought to learning dance moves from his heroes. He had spent hours analyzing her live performances, noting the way she used breathing techniques to support her highest notes, the way she positioned her body to optimize resonance, and the emotional preparation she underwent before attempting her most challenging vocal passages. Quincy Jones, who had produced Michael's biggest albums and understood his artistic process better than anyone, had been working with both performers to ensure their collaboration would be seamless. Michael called me at 2 a.m. 3 nights ago, Quincy would later recall, and he was still awake, still practicing, still trying to figure out how to complement Whitney's voice without getting in its way. That's the mark of a true artist, knowing when to step forward and when to step back. The technical challenges Michael faced were different but equally demanding. Singing alongside Whitney required him to maintain perfect pitch while potentially being overshadowed by one of the most powerful voices in music history. His vocal coach, Seth Riggs, who also worked with Whitney, had been helping Michael develop techniques to blend his lighter voice with Whitney's powerhouse sound. Michael's gift isn't raw power like Whitney's, Seth had explained during their preparation sessions. His gift is precision, emotion, and an instinctive understanding of how to serve the song. Together, they're going to create something that neither could achieve alone. This isn't about me tonight, Michael had told his longtime friend and collaborator Quincy Jones during rehearsals. This is about creating something beautiful with one of the most gifted singers I've ever heard. I just want to be part of the magic she creates. The pressure on both performers was immense, but it manifested differently in each of them. While Whitney was pushing the technical boundaries of what her voice could achieve, Michael was focused on the emotional and spiritual aspects of their collaboration. He had been meditating for hours each day, seeking what he called the zone, the mental state where technical precision met pure artistic expression. Frank DeLeo, Michael's manager at the time, had noticed the unusual level of preparation Michael was putting into this single performance. "I've managed Michael through world tours, album recordings, and major television specials," Frank would later say, "but I've never seen him prepare for anything with the level of intensity he brought to this duet with Whitney. It was like he understood that this was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime moment." The song arrangement had been carefully crafted to highlight both performers' strengths. Michael would handle the opening verse and chorus, Whitney would take the second verse, and then they would join together for what was planned to be a powerful finale. But Whitney had a secret plan that she had shared with no one, not even Michael. During their final sound check that afternoon, Whitney had tested the acoustics of Madison Square Garden with a series of vocal runs that left the sound engineers scrambling to adjust their equipment. The arena's acoustics, famous for their clarity and power, seemed to amplify Whitney's voice in ways that surprised even her. "Miss Houston," the head sound engineer had said after the check, "I've been working this venue for 20 years, and I've never heard anything like what just came out of those speakers. The arena is going to explode when you really let loose tonight." As 8:30 p.m. approached, the anticipation in Madison Square Garden was palpable. The audience represented a cross-section of music royalty, celebrities and fans who had paid premium prices for what was being billed as a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Barbra Streisand was in the front row. Paul McCartney had flown in from London specifically for this show. Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, and Aretha Franklin were all in attendance, along with hundreds of music industry executives who rarely left their offices for anything. The lights dimmed and the crowd's roar was deafening. When the spotlight hit the stage and Michael Jackson appeared in his signature black sequined jacket, the arena erupted. But when Whitney Houston emerged from the opposite side of the stage in a stunning black beaded gown, the sound became something beyond applause. It was pure emotional release from 20,000 people who knew they were about to witness history. Michael began the song with his characteristic precision and grace. His voice, warm and intimate despite the massive venue, drew the audience into the emotional landscape of the song. As he moved through the opening verse, his choreography was understated but perfect, allowing the lyrics and melody to take center stage. When Whitney joined him for the harmonies in the first chorus, something magical began to happen. Their voices blended in a way that seemed scientifically impossible. Michael's lighter, more delicate tone provided the perfect foundation for Whitney's powerful soprano, creating a sound that was greater than the sum of its parts. But it was when Whitney stepped forward for her solo verse that the evening truly began to transcend from concert to spiritual experience. Whitney's interpretation of the second verse was a masterclass in vocal storytelling. She didn't just sing the words, she inhabited them, transforming the familiar lyrics into a deeply personal statement about strength, resilience, and the power of self-belief. Her voice soared through the arena with a clarity and power that made every person in the audience feel as if she were singing directly to them. Michael, standing slightly behind her, watched with the amazement of someone who understood exactly how difficult what Whitney was doing actually was. As a perfectionist himself, he recognized the level of technical skill and emotional commitment required to deliver a performance of this caliber. As the song built toward its climax, Whitney began to improvise. The arrangement called for a traditional ending, but Whitney had other plans. She began to layer vocal runs and embellishments that seemed to come from some divine source. Each note was more impressive than the last, building towards something that everyone in the arena could sense, but no one could have anticipated. Then it happened. As the song reached what should have been its final chorus, Whitney took a breath and reached for a note that seemed to exist beyond the normal range of human vocal capability. It started low in her chest voice, then climbed with impossible smoothness through her middle register, past her upper register, and into what vocal coaches call the whistle register, a range so high that most people can't even hear it properly. But Whitney didn't just hit the note, she held it for what felt like an eternity but was actually 12 full seconds. Whitney sustained a note so pure, so powerful, and so impossibly high that it seemed to suspend the laws of physics. The note filled every corner of Madison Square Garden, resonating off the walls and ceiling with such clarity that people in the back rows could feel the vibrations in their chests. It was at that moment that something unprecedented happened. Michael Jackson, who was supposed to be singing the harmony, stopped completely. Not because he forgot the words or missed his cue, but because he was so stunned by what he was hearing that his brain simply couldn't process singing while Whitney was creating this miracle of sound. The cameras captured the exact moment when Michael's jaw dropped. His hand went to his chest and he took an involuntary step backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a performer known for his unflappable stage presence, this raw display of amazement was shocking in itself. The 20,000 people in Madison Square Garden fell into complete silence. Not the polite quiet of an attentive audience, but the profound silence that occurs when human beings witness something that transcends their understanding of what's possible. The only sound in the entire arena was Whitney's voice, holding that impossible note with a purity that seemed to come from heaven itself. When Whitney finally brought the note to a close, releasing it with the same control with which she had begun it, the silence continued for another full second. 20,000 people sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just experienced. Then Michael Jackson did something that had never happened in his professional career. He started applauding, not the modest acknowledgement that performers sometimes give each other on stage, but full, enthusiastic applause. He began clapping his hands above his head, his face showing pure joy and amazement. That broke the spell. Madison Square Garden exploded into the loudest, longest-standing ovation in the venue's history. People were crying, screaming, and applauding simultaneously. The sound was so loud that it registered on seismic equipment in the area. Security guards, who had seen every type of crowd reaction imaginable, stood with tears in their eyes. But Michael wasn't finished. As the crowd continued to roar, he walked over to Whitney, took her hand, and raised it above their heads in a gesture of pure respect and admiration. Then he leaned into his microphone and said words that would become legendary in music history. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed the greatest vocal performance in the history of this venue. Whitney Houston has just redefined what the human voice is capable of." The crowd's response was so intense that the building literally shook. Whitney, who was known for her confidence and stage presence, was visibly moved by Michael's gesture and the audience's reaction. Tears streamed down her face as she curtsied to the crowd and then embraced Michael in a hug that lasted nearly 30 seconds. What followed was an impromptu extended version of the song that became legendary among those who were there. Whitney and Michael fed off each other's energy, creating musical moments that were completely spontaneous and utterly magical. They sang additional verses, created new harmonies on the spot, and turned what was supposed to be a 4-minute song into a 15-minute experience that left everyone in the arena emotionally drained and spiritually uplifted. The backstage scene after their performance was unlike anything the Madison Square Garden staff had ever witnessed. Grown men who had worked in the music industry for decades were crying. Aretha Franklin, herself considered one of the greatest voices of all time, was heard telling anyone who would listen, "That child just sang us all under the table. I've never heard anything like that in my 50 years in this business." Paul McCartney, who had performed at Madison Square Garden dozens of times with the Beatles, approached Whitney and Michael immediately after they came off stage. "In all my years of making music," he told them, "I have never witnessed anything more powerful than what just happened out there. You two have raised the bar for what live performance can be." The recording of that performance, captured by the television cameras that were documenting the charity event, became one of the most watched music videos in history. But those who were there that night always insisted that no recording could capture the full impact of experiencing Whitney's voice and Michael's reaction in person. In the weeks that followed, music critics struggled to find words to describe what had happened at Madison Square Garden. Rolling Stone called it a transcendent moment that redefined the possibilities of live performance. The New York Times wrote, "Whitney Houston didn't just sing that night, she channeled something divine, and Michael Jackson's genuine amazement reminded us all that even legends can be surprised by greatness." The performance had a profound impact on both artists' careers. For Whitney, it established her as not just a successful recording artist, but as a vocalist of historical significance. Music schools began using footage of that performance to teach students about the outer limits of vocal possibility. For Michael, his gracious reaction to Whitney's incredible moment became one of the defining examples of his character as an artist. His willingness to step back and celebrate another performer's genius, even in the middle of his own performance, demonstrated a level of artistic maturity and security that earned him respect far beyond his already legendary status. The charity event raised over $10 million for children's hospitals across the United States. But the real lasting impact was on everyone who witnessed that performance. Hundreds of people who were in the audience that night have spoken about how the experience changed their relationship with music forever. The technical analysis of Whitney's vocal achievement that night would become legendary in music education circles. Dr. Ingo Tietze, a leading voice scientist from the University of Iowa, studied audio recordings of the performance extensively. What Whitney accomplished that evening represents the absolute pinnacle of human vocal capability, he concluded in his research paper. The note she sustained, a C8 at 4,186 hertz, is at the very edge of what the human larynx can produce. The fact that she maintained perfect pitch and tone quality while sustaining it for 12 seconds is unprecedented in recorded musical history. Music conservatories around the world began incorporating footage of that performance into their curricula, not just as an example of exceptional technique, but as a study in the power of preparation meeting opportunity. The Juilliard School created an entire semester course called the Houston-Jackson Phenomenon, examining how two artists at the peak of their abilities could elevate each other to heights neither could reach alone. The performance also had profound effects on the music industry's understanding of live vocal performance. Recording engineers began redesigning their equipment to better capture the extreme high frequencies that Whitney had accessed that night. Audio equipment manufacturers started developing new microphone technologies specifically designed to handle the full range of human vocal capability, inspired by the technical challenges that Whitney's performance had revealed. The emotional impact on the audience extended far beyond that single evening. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a music therapist who was in attendance that night, conducted a follow-up study with 200 audience members 5 years later. "What we found was remarkable," she reported. 78% of respondents said that witnessing Whitney's performance and Michael's reaction had fundamentally changed their perspective on what was possible in their own lives. Many described it as a spiritual awakening that extended far beyond music. One audience member, David Chen, a struggling musician from Brooklyn who had saved for months to afford his ticket, described the lasting impact. "I was ready to give up on music before that night. I thought I wasn't talented enough, that I'd never make it. But watching Michael Jackson, the most successful entertainer in the world, stand there in complete awe of Whitney's talent taught me that real artistry isn't about competition or ego. It's about recognizing beauty and supporting excellence wherever you find it." That changed everything for me. The recording industry took notice of the powerful synergy between the two performers. In the months following the Madison Square Garden performance, there were serious discussions about a full collaborative album between Whitney and Michael. David Geffen, one of the most influential record executives of the era, was quoted as saying, "What happened that night at MSG proved that certain combinations of talent can create magic that transcends individual achievement." A Whitney Michael album wouldn't just be commercially successful, it would be historically significant. While the full album never materialized due to conflicting schedules and record label politics, the impact of their single performance continued to reverberate throughout the industry. Producers began seeking out unexpected collaborations, understanding that the right combination of artists could create moments that define entire eras of music. The Madison Square Garden performance also influenced how live concerts were documented and preserved. The venue invested in state-of-the-art recording equipment specifically to ensure that future magical moments could be captured with the technical quality that the Whitney Michael performance deserved. "We realized that we had been present for musical history," said venue manager Tony Ramirez, "and we never wanted to be unprepared for that kind of moment again." Years later, when Whitney Houston passed away in 2012, Michael Jackson, who had died in 2009, was remembered not just as a fellow superstar, but as someone who had recognized and celebrated her extraordinary gift in one of music's most memorable moments. The footage of his reaction to her performance became a symbol of how great artists support and elevate each other. Today, Madison Square Garden has a small plaque backstage that commemorates that October night in 1988. It reads, "On this stage, Whitney Houston achieved vocal perfection, and Michael Jackson showed us how legends honor greatness." October 15th, 1988. The night music reached heaven. The venue's management reports that young performers often asked to see the exact spot where Whitney hit that legendary note, as if standing there might help them tap into some of the magic that was created that night. Music historians now refer to October 15th, 1988, as a watershed moment in live performance history. It was the night when two of the greatest entertainers who ever lived created something together that was greater than either could have achieved alone. Whitney Houston's voice reached heights that redefined what was humanly possible, and Michael Jackson's genuine amazement reminded the world that even legends can be moved to tears by the power of music. But perhaps the most beautiful part of that legendary evening was what it revealed about both performers. Whitney's willingness to take an artistic risk and push beyond the planned arrangement showed her fearless commitment to her craft. Michael's humble reaction and generous celebration of her moment showed that true greatness lies not just in individual achievement, but in the to recognize and honor excellence wherever it appears. The note that Whitney Houston hit that night at Madison Square Garden lasted 12 seconds. But the impact of that moment and Michael Jackson's incredible reaction to it will last forever.